Strong rotator cuff muscles are important for healthy, pain-free shoulders. This video will cover what mistakes to avoid and the smarter alternatives to train your rotator cuff. Poor exercise selection and wrong technique is common. Let's fix that. Chances are someone, somewhere, is currently doing this movement with the goal of shoulder warm-up, rehab or prehab. On the surface it looks pretty sound, right? The arms are going through external rotation. Doesn't this train the rotator cuff? The answer is definitely no. The resistance isn't going to stress the posterior rotator cuff. You see, gravity and the weight are acting downwards. All that's really happening is an isometric bicep contraction to keep the arms at 90 degrees. A superior alternative for this specific movement is using a machine or a resistance band. The tension is acting in the horizontal plane. This means the rotator cuff is now functioning correctly. Do you only have access to weights? No worries, get yourself into side lying. Now we're actually working against gravity, and this will correctly target the back of the shoulder. Be super strict with the setup by lying directly on your side with the head supported. We want to minimize all the unnecessary, superfluous, extraneous movements that are happening in the body. We want the movement to be purely external rotation and no movement anywhere else. Moving on, let's take a look at the popular Cuban rotation. This exercise is very common because it has the potential for loading up and going heavy. With these, we're now opting for a 90-90 position at the shoulder and the elbow. Rotator cuff 101 suggests moving to an overhead position is a progression. However, it can be argued the standing Cuban rotation using free weights is an inferior resistance method. Once again, we're facing the issue of the weight acting in relation to gravity. Sure, the outer to mid range of motion is challenged, but when the weight stacks vertically over the body, not much is really happening. Now, once the weight goes behind head level, we're only effectively stretching into external rotation, which isn't overly useful for stabilization gains. Here are two more effective ways to train external rotation. Let's cover them both so you can decide. In the interest of replicating specificity with a 90-90 unsupported elbow, bend over. The first thing you're going to notice is I'm using much lighter weight plates instead. Because we're working directly against gravity through a full range of motion, it's humblingly hard. Our rear delts and lateral delts maintain the shoulder to elbow position while the posterior cuff does the rotating. What makes these an effective alternative is the inner range when the hands near the head actually feels challenging. This is of major importance because the inner range of motion contraction is actually where we're the weakest, which means we've got the most to gain. If you want to go heavier and overload a lower rep range, elbow support is a good option. Consistent with the theme of this video, we're now authentically challenged against gravity. Be sure to use strict joint angles. Do this by maintaining a 90-90 shoulder and elbow angle while you rotate. Once you contrast the feeling from the floor versus standing Cuban, it's going to become very clear how important exercise setup is for rotator cuff sensation, stimulation, and strength. For those of you that are lazy when it comes to setup or you just don't have free weights, listen up. Bands are the perfect alternative as it solves countless problems. We're now pulling directly against the line of pull, the line of resistance. Most importantly, we're being challenged towards the limit of external rotation, that inner range contraction. We're no longer at the mercy of gravity. Lastly, if you're wondering why we're setting up in kneeling, it's very simple. We want to put our lumbar spine into flexion to avoid any cheating. That way we can localize the movement to our back, shoulders, and rotator cuff. Here's some technical mistakes and the correct alternatives everyone should apply. Most people have poor control over their scapula, which limits results. Scapular setting allows the rotator cuff muscles to work, which minimizes the larger global muscles from assisting too much. Once the elbow begins drifting away from the body, the deltoids are being used to cheat rotation. Simply set the elbow into a fixed position and keep it stationary. The shoulder and the external rotators are certainly going to get a workout as intended. A really common mistake the overly ambitious trainee makes is using super heavy resistance. If momentum is required or range of motion needs to be cut short, these are an obvious sign things are too demanding. This approach excessively drains the central nervous system while not even localizing stress to the cuff muscles. This is a very poor effort to reward ratio. Why do we have to do everything in absolute extremes? Choose a happy middle ground, use a moderate resistance, and enjoy those rotator cuff gains. When and how to train the rotator cuff confuses many people. The best warm-up is the exercise you're training on the day. For example, if you're about to do front levers, doing a regression first is the most effective warm-up possible. Simply include rotator cuff exercises after a calisthenics workout or on off days. Timing matters. Lastly, we want to keep track of all objective methods in order to force progressive overload. This includes band resistance or weight, sets and reps, and also weekly frequency. If you want to get better at calisthenics, you follow a Fitness FAQs program, remain consistent, and seek tangible improvement. A strong rotator cuff is no different. We must track and we must progress where possible. Thanks everyone for watching. Visit fitnessfaqs.com for the best calisthenics program. Otherwise, feel free to watch another YouTube video to level up your knowledge and train smarter.